There we go. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us in our final webinar on the How Learning Works book series. This is our discussion on chapter number 7 on how do students become self-directed learners. So we have a really great quote there, hopefully by Albert Einstein. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. Albert Einstein. So I think this chapter was all about, helping our students to become more self-directed in their learners and sort of the metacognitive strategies that, we can think about and implement in our classrooms to, help students achieve the goal of becoming a more self-directed learner. So we did something last discussion that we think worked really well, and that was just to do a very quick recap on the scenarios that were offered at the beginning of the chapter. Just so we have a sort of a common point to refer back to. We can refer back to these stories as we have our further discussion. So, scenario number 1 was the A student. So just a quick synopsis. The student expresses concern about her grade on her first big assignment. The instructor saw the student's paper as just sort of a typical first paper, weak argument, limited evidence, etc., not that great. The student, met up with the instructor. I believe they're on a walk after class. The student argues with the instructor that, she's a really gifted student that has done really well in the past, especially in high school. And, she thinks that she did a better job than the instructor credited her for. So the instructor was kind of expecting a higher level of work that the student was unprepared to give, and the student doesn't understand that.
Another point about that one is that she claimed that she works best to write it all at the end, and that's what always worked for her before. So working under pressure was something that she felt squeezed out the creativity.
Yeah, really great point. So something that worked for her in the past didn't work for her this time. Scenario number 2, the hamster wheel. You have basically the opposite of scenario number 1 here. Scenario number 2, we have a diligent student who repeatedly scores poorly on exams measuring conceptual understanding of a topic. The instructor spoke with the student and realized that the student actually has a really intense study habit, that he looked at the student's textbook and realized that, the whole thing was yellow with basically passages the student memorized and highlighted, etc. Terms, definitions, basically all the facts that was presented to the student. However, the student was unsuccessful in the test of conceptual knowledge because his study habits didn't align with what the test was measuring. This study habit of, regurgitating the things that he learned from the text and the materials worked for him very well in high school, but doesn't quite meet up to the conceptual needs that, his instructor is trying to give to him in college. So there's a quick synopsis of scenario 1 and 2. Did anyone have anything else you wanted to add to those or about those?
Or connections, reactions?
I think one of the things, just in the reading, how you help students develop the metacognitive skills they need in using formative assessments, throughout maybe their program or whatever. I wondered if by focusing on that, because we've all met these students, by focusing on those types of things early on and maybe even more programmatically, we might have less of these scenarios in the sense that the students will begin to understand their own knowledge gaps, and it will be more powerful for them because they would, instead of coming to us with this, they would maybe, know more about themselves as learners. It was just something that resonated with me as I was reading.
That makes sense.
So absolutely. I really, something that, struck me is I think, the formation of building metacognitive habits was something that I thought about a lot. They had a slide a little bit later that we have, or an image that sort of outlines a metacognitive process that you can follow. And, I think it's really important that, in addition to teaching subject knowledge, we train our students to follow a process like that one, because not only is it going to help them learn the subject now, but it's going to train them to learn better in the future, learn more in the future.
Even the appendices that they offered, on the self-assessments, they weren't anything that, too complicated. But when I slowed myself down and read them really carefully, I was thinking, again, to reiterate, if intentionally thread it through all the courses, if we think about it more programmatically, how much stronger the students would feel themselves about themselves as learners, and especially, as teachers, understanding children and making all those connections. Have some of that here, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything you want to add real quick? Nope. Do you want to read this one, Diane, or me?
Well,
continue?
yeah,
Either way.
Really what we were trying to do with this one is just sort of generate some examples from your own experience in how you see this phenomena. It might look different. And I was also kind of curious, as I was hearing Ann talk too, if we're seeing students that actually come with some metacognitive strategies and more awareness, because I know there has been increasing emphasis in K-12 learning about building these sorts of skills. So I don't know what you're seeing in your classes, what patterns.
That's such an interesting question, right? Because you would think that since they're focusing on that in K through 12, we would see some of that in our classes. And we were doing some of these self-assessments in our practicum as we're getting ready for student teaching. And I had two students that I can think of, Kelly and Melissa, who just seemed to get it more. I mean, I didn't really inquire about, where they came from, but they seemed to understand, and they seemed to have some of the, I didn't go through it completely because I'll do that with my student teaching, but I wondered about that, just that anecdotal of them understanding more about themselves as learners, talking about themselves as learners, because I think right in the book they asked us then to go on our own journey. So maybe having our students go on this journey and really even tapping their own prior knowledge. Maybe it wasn't called that back then. Maybe we're giving it names, but it would be interesting to see more about how that's happening in the high schools and how we're tapping into it. Are we? That would be just an interesting piece.
Yeah, I think, everybody in this webinar today is from NCE, so we're all preparing educators. I'm wondering how we're, alerting them to this, these sets of practices.
I think Shanti had it. Oh, no. Sorry.
Hi, this is Angela. I have my students, this term they wrote a metacognitive journal, and I asked them to go through weekly learning experiences and to talk about themselves and other learners in that context in a variety of formats. So online, informal, go and observe a colleague. And I also have them reflect through learning surveys and concept mapping.
I love the cognitive, did you say cognitive learning journals? I like that idea.
Metacognitive learning journals.
Yeah. I like
what kind of things do they talk about, Angela?
They talk about, a lot of them are surprised when they really slow down and see, to really think about their learning. They did a pre and a post, what is learning, and I can see that, most of them have grown exponentially. The one that didn't grow very much is the one that doesn't have prior knowledge, and it really is very evident. But they're able to analyze in much more depth once they, but it's a process. It takes some time and practice. They talk about all kinds of things, the similarities in the way that people teach, the different aspects of informal learning that maybe they could bring to their classrooms.
And I bet the technique itself, like you said, just helps them. You really do almost have to slow down, right? To really make the process powerful for you and for the learners that you're going to be.
If we have time, I'm happy to share one.
Anybody else want to share their observations of their students' metacognition or lack of metacognition, or opportunities that you try to provide them to practice?
You know, I'm trying to think about that now. So I don't teach any actual classes yet, but, you know, I do a lot of, you know, D2L training and things like that. And, you know, thinking technically, like I work with a lot of new adjuncts and things like that. I really don't see any evidence of much metacognitive processes in the trainings that we offer. I know that we cover a lot, and I usually end up overwhelming a lot of people just, you know, in the 3-hour training that we do. So maybe adding some metacognitive approaches into that is maybe a good idea, maybe a bad idea. I'm not sure. But
I think,
oh man,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying I'm trying to think of like I really don't see any of my learners thinking about things metacognitively. They're really just, most of them, about 90% of them, just basically write down step after step after step. And I want to tell them, no, don't do that. Just read, you know, these different links and try to make a decision on what the next best thing to do is. Because if you write down this process, it's going to be like 30 different clicks and 30 different things you have to write down.
So the first response is to often be procedural, and to write it procedural. And I wonder if that isn't because they lack the conceptual framework to sort of organize it in any other way except a procedural. I know my experience is when I feel like I don't have the bigger picture, I can't, I have to follow a recipe. I have to follow someone's steps. If I don't have enough knowledge to sort of, and that's the thing I think about these metacognitive strategies. It takes a certain amount of subject matter knowledge to be effective in like, if you look at the principle here on this page, they have very specific practices that are part of this: analyzing the demands of the task, evaluating their own knowledge, strengths and weaknesses in relation to those task demands, planning, then monitoring progress. That envision benchmarks of progress, and then adjusting your strategies. That takes a good amount of the content knowledge or subject matter knowledge to be able to be metacognitive. So I think that's one of the limiting factors that, and even when we create the space, it's like it's getting that balance right, again, of assessing your learner's knowledge base in relation and trying to get it, you know, you talked about this in previous webinars, trying to get the challenge of the task just right so they have enough knowledge to assess the task and know what's, you know, required, or what knowledge needs to be deployed. So, you know, that takes some thought about where you're coming from. Yeah.
You know, absolutely. And you know, in the book, they had a really great example of, you know, people who don't take the time to assess and evaluate something. They just sort of jump right in. I think they were speaking about, you know, students or advanced students and intermediate or introductory students who are completing a math problem. They said that the intermediate students usually make more errors because they just sort of jump right in without thinking about the problem as a whole. So maybe something that I need to do, and I just thought about this as you were talking, Diane, is maybe I need to spend more time during my trainings on just assessing and evaluating. So maybe open up my trainings with a discussion of, you know, what other LMS systems or what other online platforms they've used in the past, or how they do their grading and things like that in their current courses, or how they've done it in the past, how they've seen it done it, and maybe spend more time with them, or sort of assessing what we're going to be doing. Maybe having them create a list of different things that they're going to need in order to teach an online class. Like maybe say something like, you know, what do you have in order to teach, you know, a normal face-to-face class? You have, you know, reading assignments, you have some group interactive activities, you have maybe a short lecture, you have all these different things. Now we need to figure out how to put that into D2L so they have some sort of a frame for what they're doing, rather than just, you know, setting up a grade book for the sake of setting up a grade book. And then
that's a great idea, Anthony. That's a great idea, Anthony. Especially the more public you can make that assessment so that it's a very public process, and that people are, they're sharing their prior knowledge with you and then you're simultaneously helping them build that framework.
That's another thing. I was in a webinar last night, and something else I'm learning in my TIE program, my instructor, Lucy, was saying that, in her world, it's more and more common, K through 12 education, that students are sharing all of their work. And she sees a really big split here in higher education. And at NLU, all of our work is kept within our classrooms. We don't share everything. I was thinking how great it would be to just have a platform where, all of our instructors can go and say, hey, students, post your work here. And we can all, as a community, as an NLU community, comment and view and like and favorite other people's assignments and things like that. Maybe someday.
Well, and you could build the forum. I mean, that was some of the thinking behind the forums, right? Sort of making public our own practices and student work within those practices. We're not sharing it with students, but there's no reason why we couldn't. Shanti.
Actually, I was thinking of forums because I was thinking of Angela's forum on assessment, and it really relates to what you were saying, Anthony, where she starts with a survey about some of the knowledge base related to what she's going to teach, and then she shows out results and, sort of a survey share out, so it both shows everyone but protects your confidentiality because you're looking at it in the aggregate. She also asks this really interesting question. Do you want to say, Angela? I'm speaking for you, but about what should I know about you as a learner? It's a really interesting question to start out with. What should I know about you as a learner and a teacher? And she was fascinating.
It's an opportunity for them to talk about what's going on. Sometimes there's a lot going on at school, but there's, oftentimes if you ask, they'll tell you things that might be going on in their life, which can't help but impact on their performance. So it's really very powerful.
So this is an example of how you were kind of linking full circle back to where we started with chapter 1 in the first principle about prior knowledge. Like that can be a part of assessing the task demand, it seems to me, like in the way we're talking about it. So using, the instructor gets insight into that prior knowledge, and they get insight into how their prior knowledge relates to the task demands before them in this new learning environment in which they're going to be working. It's cool. What are other people thinking? Other connections?
Do we have anyone else here? Carol, Ryan, any ideas? Shanti, you already spoke up.
I think we could see Carol and Ryan.
I was thinking about, it's not specifically on this topic. I was just thinking more about kind of like the tension I feel between providing really explicit, like this be more explicit than what you deem necessary, providing really explicit directions and steps, and here's an example, and here's what I don't want, and here's the checklist for every assignment, and then how I feel like that somehow impedes students' abilities to assess what a task demands and what their own level of it almost seems like they're relying on those crutches so much that their model looks a lot like the model that I provide, or the steps that they're taking are the steps that I'm giving them, but they're not internalizing the thinking that needs to happen. So I like this in the closing section, how they talked about checking students' understanding of the task, like having them put in their own words what they think the purpose of this task is, what they think the steps that would make sense for them to take, and then giving them feedback on their self-assessment as one step. But I'm wondering if anybody else is struggling with that, finding the right balance between being really explicit about all the steps and processes and examples and everything, but then also helping scaffold for students so that they can do the work, especially with the 10-week courses. It just seems like it's so quick to do the gradual release of responsibility to them in that time period.
We even have the 6-week courses, and I think I really dislike taking the 6-week courses myself, just because, yeah, you're right, 10 weeks is pretty fast. 6 weeks is absolutely too fast, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Ryan, and I think it's a judgment call depending on the learning outcome goals for the class and the students' level of experience with the material. I just think some of those things have to come into play, and I don't know if there's one easy answer, but I see your point about the tension between some of the explicitness here that they talk about, and then this, and I think maybe in my head it might have to do a little bit with that notion of expertise and where students are in that learning progression toward not just within the course, but in general. So it's like having some sense of that, a longer learning progression outside of the course for what the ultimate goals are and what they need to get accomplished. I don't know. Does anybody else have some thoughts about that?
When you're training something new, I think it's really important that you do have those crutches for students to rely on. And then, if you have time, you practice. And as students are practicing, you slowly remove those crutches. And eventually, it's like riding a bike. You see at the park, the father or the mother is running behind the student or the son or daughter on a bike. Eventually, they let go and the kid's off on his own. That happened the other day. I was looking at that. So it's a really delicate balance of, I would say up front, definitely provide them all of those crutches, then maybe slowly start taking them away if you can over time as they continue practicing.
And there's maybe different things you're providing support for, continuing, and some things are being taken away, like depending on earlier developing skills or knowledge and later developing skills or knowledge once they get deeper into a program, for example. And that, to me, Ryan's question goes to the heart of why I think courses can't exist in isolation. And I think that's another problem we have in higher education, that too often, we don't have enough time for faculty to really design learning progressions that really go across programs that students are going to experience, because you don't get everything you need to know in one class for the ultimate goals they're trying to achieve. And I think that does make it, a little more complicated to try to think about what's scaffolded in your course, Ryan, but maybe not in the next or whatever.
Some of the competency-based models I've seen out there pretty much do away with classes as we know them. They look at a progression as like a whole program at once. They don't do specific classes. Students can be anywhere in the course or anywhere in the program, and then based on how they do it, they can have instructors who are assigned to help students in modules 1 through 3, or they can have one faculty member who follows them throughout. So maybe just a different way of looking at it as an entire program rather than individual courses. I think, looking at individual courses can somewhat just make it a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've kind of addressed that.
Yeah.
I've kind of addressed that in the doctoral program here in Florida. And since 2012, I've been developing language and a presentation and for doctoral students, and so it's basically the main point is, well, you're in doctoral school now, and so here's the expectations we have of doctoral students, and they're different from your last program that you had at NLU.
Mm-hmm.
And I go into self-regulation of learning, self-direction of learning, and other support. Finally, I've kind of like this January, I kind of really hit my groove. It takes an hour and a half. I have a PowerPoint, and it takes an hour and a half for me to gently get through this with students so they're not scared.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's been a very interesting phenomenon that I've observed, and then I finally found some research on it, that when you get what I've noticed at the doctoral level is there's a lot of fixed mindset in plenty of people, and that is they're so good they don't need to do, they don't have to worry about this. And so actually that's part of the language I incorporated, and I said, we know you're good. You're here, and you're here to get better and learn, So I've had to embrace this and acknowledge, like, oh, we know you're good. Okay?
Nice.
But you're here to look to get better, and we want to see improvement. Oh, and by the way, here's the NCE disposition assessment, and you're not supposed to mark yourself at the highest level on the first term on that, by the way, on all fives on that. And I don't say it that way, of course, but but I've had doctoral last year when I gave that to a new cohort. I had students rate themselves throughout that whole assessment at the very highest level in term one.
I do that.
I know, and I noticed when I handed it out this year, there was somebody has put kind of X'd out that highest level on that. There's a grid in there, and basically it says this option's not available. So now they can't rate themselves at the highest level. So
it's so fun. That just it's either a reflection on the task in how they perceive it, or that they do have really limited awareness, metacognitive awareness of their own.
Oh, absolutely. And then I go into this whole I talk about it, and I model practices on metacognitive awareness, like, how do you do a lit review? I mean, usually the students have never done a lit review. They've never done research. And that's another thing, that's another phenomenon that's emerged since 2012 as I've observed the new, students. I actually had one student said this actually, because I drew them into a conversation in class, and one student actually said, when I learn something new and I don't get it perfect on the first try, I feel bad about myself. And I'm like, the light bulb's going off in my head, like, oh, well, this explains so much, and instead I just said to the students, and you're being way too hard on yourself. These research is not easy. Statistics is not easy. Especially if you've not done it before, and it's okay to, that's part of self-regulating learning, is to know when you need to ask for help.
Right.
So that's another big lesson I kind of hammer through the 3 years of the program. And it's like the most important skill I learned in my doctoral program was how to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, there's a strategy. It's called the Muddiest Point. Have you ever? Yeah. And it's where you just ask students after you present something, what material did you find confusing in the material presented today? And sometimes when you start that in the beginning, you'll get them all going, oh, there's nothing confusing. It's, again, you just give them some time to talk. But as the course continues, they begin to all realize and recognize that there are things, like you said, that they don't know. And it's okay to say that. Again, that whole idea of just learning, it's a great strategy. I've used it periodically, but going back down to what Diane and Anthony were saying, I think looking at things programmatically and how powerful it would be if there are strategies that we would all use, right? So that students, when they come to you, they will be thinking and understanding that there are, things that that need to learn and keep learning and admit it, together.
I love that, the Muddiest Point. I think I'm going to try that. I've never used that. That sounds great. But I wanted to hear, Carol, what have you seen with this since 2012? What have you been seeing in your students since you've been building this layer of metacognitive learning in?
Well, so in 2012, which was the first year we had the doctoral program, I would say these things, and by the end of the year, because they're supposed to have finished a project by the end of the year, I was confounded as to why so many people ignored what I said. So there's been a very developmental process here of, because that's what I always do. I always monitor the effectiveness of my communication. I actually started that when I was in enrollment, starting like in 1990. So I've had to develop the language, and cause that's the whole point of it. How do I say it so they remember it, or so they get it, or so they grasp on it? So I've developed these what to say. I bring in resources now that, you know, are supported by research. Like they're very resistant to outlining a case study before they write it. And in fact, they don't even, some of them don't even remember how to properly outline. And so I've had to really work on that to, you know, lots of scaffolding and in-class practice and things like that, and to show them, you know, so if I, you know, luckily I found a book in Hattie's page on self-regulated, the chapter on self-regulated learning. And, you know, the highest, he had a chart of the most effective self-regulating learning strategies. And number one, with an 85.85 effect size, was outline a paper before you write it. So I copied that page, and now that's part of my presentation. You know, and so, what I say to students is, you know, if you write an outline first, there's a very high probability that your grade on your first draft is going to be almost an entire letter grade higher, because it's 0.85, you know, of a standard deviation. So I just kind of explain it as almost an entire letter grade higher. And in fact, when students do it, you know, then the results are there, and then they say, oh yeah, I see your point. But I did use that money point and for a while, but what I found is they want to be anonymous. And so then I got another student to talk, and she, you know, the quote from her is, students are afraid to ask questions in class because they don't want to seem to the other students in class like they don't know. So now I do a parking lot instead, and so I have sticky notes, pads, and I'll use sticky notes, and I hand them out on the first day of the semester, and then which they forget to bring later. So I have extra sticky notes. So if they want to write the question on a sticky note and put it, you know, near my laptop, you know, on the way to break or something, because they want to be anonymous, and they don't want the other people in class to see that they're asking questions. And you know, I just, even though I've been so encouraging and supportive of, oh, please ask questions, I like beg them to ask questions and stuff like that, you know, it's like, well, I'll do whatever I have to do to get their questions, you know. So.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you've done a ton to really sort of shift in that direction. That's really great.
Yeah, I gotta write about it now.
Yeah.
Gotta find the time.
Shanti, were you going to say something? I noticed you. Oh,
No.
So Ryan's comment and also some of what Carol said earlier reminded me of a story I wanted to sort of just really briefly share with you as like an introduction that I missed. You know, I was at the Lyle Library last week, and I was reading through this chapter, and I reached the section in the back of the chapter, all of the implementation strategies. And, you know, this section was really long. You know, I think it was longer probably than the rest of any of the other implementation strategies in the book. But anyways, I was sitting there in the library, I was focusing on my own work, and a tutor came up and sat at a desk that was just across from me. And a few minutes later, a student came up to the tutor. They said hello, and the tutor and the student started, you know, talking with each other. You know, I wasn't really paying attention, listening word for word, you know, but I picked up on a lot of their conversations sitting so close to them. They were discussing, you know, math concepts. And I just so happened to be reading this part of the chapter while this was going on just next to me. And, you know, as I was reading these things, be more explicit than you may think necessary, tell students what you do not want, check students' understanding of the task. I was just basically going down the list, and this tutor one-to-one was implementing all of these things with the student. So the tutor really started off by being very explicit, listing every single step necessary. You know, step number 2 here, I heard at one point the instructor was saying, okay, so you found this, but is that what we want? And then it progressed to, no, that's not what we want. Remember, the question is asking for this, not this. And I was like, yes, that's this one. And then I moved down, check students' understanding of the task. You know, another question, the instructor or the tutor asked the student, you know, what are we trying to find here? How are we going to find that before the student even took pencil to paper? So I was just like, yes, it's really great. NLU is, you know, using a lot of these strategies, and we're really providing our students some really great learning experiences, even though, you know, that's one-to-one, that's outside of the classroom. You know, I even got the impression based on, how they were speaking with each other and, how they said goodbye to each other, that the student was the one who reached out to the tutor. She was like, thank you for meeting me. I hope to never see you again in this capacity, things like that. So we have a really self-directed learner there that actually sought out the tutoring help to begin with.
But yeah, and that's a great example, Anthony. But what it makes me think about, connecting back to Ryan's wondering, that student was struggling, what to get needing the individual help. So there was a higher, maybe less expertise with the material and the task, and a need for more emphasis on these explicit instruction. Then maybe, it strikes me there's a continuum that we probably need to think about along which to apply these strategies, and that when you have more advanced learners, maybe you don't worry as much about the explicitness, or it's a matter of degree. But when you have a learner who's struggling, then you keep unpacking those the expectations and what goes into doing the work. That's just a thought, I think.
So I think the main question, though, was like, you have to start out with these explicit things, but the student, ends up relying on those things. But I think just in the space of one session, this facilitator, this tutor really started off by just listing every individual step. And then by the end of the session, the student was basically on her own with the facilitator still there, like confirming what she's doing along the way.
So she took ownership.
She took ownership, yeah, but just in the space of one session, this is, it was just one concept that they were working on. So, it's doable, and it's one student. It'd be harder for a group of students. But, I liked how over time he slowly removed those scaffolds, and eventually he moved from doing it himself to having the student do it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'm cognizant of time here. I have a technology platform that I wanted to demo for you. That I thought aligns to a lot of these strategies. I think we also wanted to talk about, further learning opportunities a little bit, get your feedback on, what we can do in the future, considering this is our last How Learning Works session. So, Diane, did we want to say anything about this slide?
The one thing I want to say about this slide is that what I really liked about this chapter is it offered us some really specific practices in which to evaluate our students, and to make also practices that you don't have to do all of these things, it seems to me, or maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the question. Do you do all these things or not? But these are like under the metacognitive practices. If we build a metacognitive learning environment, we probably want to include some of these practices, it seems to me, and they can build up a strategic knowledge base for the students. So the more they get to practice these, then they have that, and that experiential learning allows them to kind of represent cognitively that as strategic knowledge. So if they encounter that problem again, they can deploy the strategy, or they can make judgments about whether the strategy applies. So I think these are some categories we can think about assessing and watching for our students' metacognitive competence, and creating some space within classes for them to practice it. And it's a doing thing, right? It's something they have to do. It's something, I don't think it'll work if they're just told that this is important, but they have to probably get coached through doing it. So experientially sort of use the strategy, and so time in classes to do these things, to assess a task, to assess themselves, to stop and think and plan. They may not think to do that themselves. So I think these are where some of our judgment calls are about which of these do we want to build into our class and make sure students, and I think it's a conversation space for faculty actually, because this is the most important element we can build across programs, and kind of be on the same page about, because we can't teach everybody everything they need to know, but we want to teach them to be lifelong learners, and these are the tools. This sort of strategic knowledge is really critical. So that was sort of what I wanted to say about this one.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the image. The image here was really, to me, like an outline of the chapter. All of the rest of the sections were basically on assessing and evaluating and planning, and all of these, I think, fit into this image here. So this is what really got me thinking about, just habit forming actually explicitly making each of these components part of our assignments. Maybe not the smallest assignments just for lack of time, but a normal assignment, have an assessment component, have an evaluation component, have a planning component before they put pen to paper or before they start doing something. That was just my thought there. So a nice little strategy. I like to boil things down into like a digestible chunk, and I think this image does that pretty nicely. Any other comments before we move on? No? All right. So as you all know, the implementation strategies that they presented in this chapter were fairly long, so I couldn't include all of them, and I don't want to. I think they all overlap with each other a bit, and with, things that we've learned in previous chapters. So basically what I've done here is I've gone through and I've cherry-picked just a few of them here. And I want to keep these in the back of our mind as I show you a platform which was recently demoed to me that I just absolutely love. And I want you to, maybe we'll think about, how these things can be accomplished in this platform. I think that they all fit within the platform. So we'll go over these again. I'm just going to move on for now.
I think we talked about a lot of these already.
We did talk about a lot of them, and they're in the book, so you've all read it anyways. So I want to show you a platform called Chrome Warrior. Has anyone here heard of Chrome Warrior before? I'm looking at the pictures. I'm seeing a bunch of head shakes. Okay, Chrome Warrior is a fairly unknown platform, or a fairly new platform, and it's basically a learning management system that's built for teacher professional development. It's actually very customizable though. So, in a company that Chrome Warrior sells to is a alpine ski rental company, and they actually modified the whole Chrome Warrior system to make basically a public LMS for alpine safety. So it's very customizable. But basically what you have here is a gamified learning management system. So you can engage your learners with gamification. There's lots of pedagogy sciences that go into their learning management system. You can award badges and certificates. Everything is very social within this learning management system. So it makes your learning social. It actually even, posts like when you earn points on assignments to like Twitter and different social media accounts. It's a cloud system, and it's built with, school districts, and even actually just really right now school districts in mind. But the sales representative I spoke to said that they'd be more than happy to accommodate university applications. But anyways, let me go ahead and show you what we have here and why I like it so much. I click on this. That should open my Chrome Warrior page here. And there's actually a demo that they have posted online. Anyone here can go sign up for their demo, chromewarrior.net/demo. And basically what it is, it's a student version of the Chrome Warrior system. So within here, they have a course built out, and you can actually go through the course, and a facilitator here at Chrome Warrior will actually go and assess all of your assignments and things like that. So it's really great. I only did a few of the activities myself. So what you can do is click play Chrome Warrior there. So again, gamified, so it's all play, not do this, do that. It's things like that. We can log in with a whole bunch of different options here. I'm going to choose Google, and I'm just going to log in with my Google account here. And this is basically what we have within Chrome Warrior. So play Chrome Warrior, we have a big play button. Students can get started with their learning. And then we have a lot of social features. So over here, we can see basically an activity log. These are the people who logged in and completed these activities. Here's when they did it. So you can see, your fellow learners learning along with you. This is a new feature that they really just added. Top weekly schools, top schools, so they can pit schools against each other. This is just a demo account, so all they have here is the demo courses. So you can actually have schools competing with each other to earn the most points. Top weekly performers, so these are the people that learned the most this week, and top players overall, these are the people who learned, the most. So it gives you a lot of tools there to gauge your progress versus, the progress of your colleagues. Let me go up to the top here. We have a lot of different options up here. I really want to just point out the badging here. A big part of Chrome Warrior, it's a gamified learning management system. You can award badges to all of your participants for completing different tasks within Chrome Warrior. That's basically like giving a grade. Right now, these badges are only within Chrome Warrior, but they are really trying heavily to make the badges open badges that you can transfer out to, you know, LinkedIn or D2L or whatever other systems you might be using. There's also some really great reporting functionality. The student version is a little bit limited, but like the administrative version allows you to, you know, run reports on, you know, who's completed such assignments, who has earned these badges, etc. But let me get into the learning content here. That's all the back end stuff. In order to get into the content, I'm either going to click that green button that I showed you earlier, or I can click my game board here. And basically what you're going to be asked to do at that point is join a game. And a game is sort of like a class. And then within classes, you have modules and specific learning objectives. So for example, I have Master the Basics. That's level 1. Move down here. I have level 2, Up Your Game, which has more topics underneath of it. And basically what I do is I move through basically competency-based modules here. So we have the task of becoming becoming informed of 21st century classroom. And then within that, you're being very explicit and you have all of the individual little components there broken down within that. So there's the big assignments right here, and then you have like individual little tasks. So you basically work up towards that big assignment here. All of these are very customizable, so we'll just click on any one of them here. You can see that this one I have completed, so I got a little check mark and I earned 25 points, which then puts me on the leaderboard. These other activities here, I have been paused. So I didn't actually know that the facilitator would go through and, you know, assess my work. So I just, you know, submitted some whatever files I could find on my computer, and she said, no, you need to follow the instructions. So that was really great. But anyways, if we click on any one of these, you know, it actually tells you, it's very specific with you what the success criteria are for, or what the success criteria are. This is just a demo, so I don't think they put too much here. They also include, you know, the help center, which is, you know, videos, support guides. You can type whatever you want in here. This is a lot like building a content page in D2L. What you do down here is you can type in a description, so you can ask questions to your facilitator, you can type in comments about your work, and whatever you type in here basically becomes a discussion with your instructor. After you submit your file, the instructor can then respond to your comments here, and you can continue your discussion back and forth. So you submit your file, record achievement, that goes to your facilitator. Your facilitator looks at the file, they can give you feedback on your work, etc. And while you're waiting for that feedback, you can move on to the next component of your module here. What I like about this, though, is another thing is this is really great for giving that early feedback. So, you know, they've broken down this big task into a lot of different areas. So if a student, you know, goes through half of these and then realizes that, you know, you've been pausing them, they might reassess their strategy before they move on to these final options here. Another thing is right here, you'll notice that, you know, they have to earn a certain amount of points before they can move on to the next level, basically. So, you know, it limits. So if they don't earn those points, if you pause their work and you didn't give them those points, they're not going to be able to earn their way into the next level. So it's not time-based like a lot of our classes. It's more about proficiency and competency-based, which might be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on if you're an administrator or if you're actually trying to teach someone how to do something. One more thing, you know, I really love is just the social aspects. So, you know, like I said earlier, you can configure your account to actually post your achievements to different social media accounts. I know something that like the people over here that created Chrome Warrior, they actually have a Twitter account that's dedicated to student achievements that you can follow. And if you follow that account, you'll get, you know, tweets from, you know, so-and-so completed this activity, so-and-so completed this activity. So it's really cool. You can go to that Twitter account and you can see a constant feed of all the activity that's going on in Chrome Warrior. It even gives you like relative scoring here. So, you know, out of everyone in your class or everyone in my class, I'm number 14 because I earned 25 points. So you can see, you know, where you stand in terms of your own class. So another way you can sort of assess your own learning there. Badges, all that fun stuff. So that was really a very quick demo of Chrome Warrior, a gamified learning management system, lots of social features, lots of social interaction options, and it's just a little bit fun. I'd love to build something out in this learning management system. It does come at a cost, though, per license. So something to think about.
That is really cool.
It's really cool. I
Yeah.
Anyways,
was coming along.
Shut up.
sorry?
I just opened it and I was sort of looking at it. And,
Oh yeah, I really didn't do it justice. It's really, I would consider it to be a really top-notch learning management system, just because I think it's simple and fun, and I think it'd be quick for instructors to pick up, especially like our instructors. I think that you could get in here and start taking a game, or start participating in a game, learn something without too much startup time. It's not like another really complex learning management system where you have to figure out everything. There's only a few things that you can click on. So I can see like adding this on top of another system like D2L or something like that.
it would be really helpful, Anthony, in our workshops that we develop as a platform for personalized professional development, like you said, because it also can be social. Even if you just get 4 or 5 people who sign up for something, then you have other aspects of the social nature of it, just looking at it as an LMS for that. Plus it includes the digital badges.
Absolutely. So we had one more slide on the concept map. Go ahead and share my screen one more time. And so we've had these in the rest of our sessions. Did you want to say anything about that, Diane? Last 5 minutes.
The model that's really helped me think about designing learning environments. And I think I've talked about it before, but I really think the metacognition piece is an important bridge that we can experiment with to help students manage their working memory. I think it's important to remember that there are these other features, and I think Ryan's questions and some of what Carol talked about really point to that there's the knowledge base and how much knowledge they bring to it, what their prior knowledge and experience is, the degree of structure that the environment provides. That all interact, the working memory gets enhanced or inhibited by how well we're able to balance the learning environment with what the learner knows. And then the metacognitive is that the bridging strategies or practices that really can help students keep a focus on the focus accurately in their working memory, stay on task, be drawing the appropriate knowledge and skills they need for the task demands, monitoring their progress, evaluating how well they've accomplished it for next time, for future learning situations. So those are the 4 big ideas that are about learning. Learning assessment activities can be an important part of that supportive learning environment. I think of a lot of things we do in instruction is actually potentially assessment oriented, and especially if you're thinking about them helping students think about their own thinking. So stopping, and it does require slowing it down. I think several of you talked about the fact that when you're thinking about the students' thinking strategies and how they're approaching things, it does require you to slow it down a little bit and be focused on that a little bit more than just the content and what you're trying to get through and accomplish. So I think assessment is a key instructional strategy from this perspective that's been highlighted in this text. So I don't know, that's it's really helped me to design for learning when I take these 3 big ideas into account and then sort of unpack each of them with the research. I think each of the chapters provides research to help us unpack those ideas. Questions, thoughts, other connections?
Diane, just getting back to your point about the importance of metacognition for teachers in particular. I think one of the things in helping teachers model their own use of metacognitive strategies or reading strategies and things like that. It seems like one of the pieces that they find most challenging early on is the what, the nature of strategy use. So like when, why, how do I use this? They're good at like doing the procedural nature of it, but less about like when do I know how to use this? How do I choose how to use it? How do I know when it's appropriate? How do I modify it based on what I'm trying to accomplish? And so I think like an added benefit of, along with helping our teachers become more effective learners in our classes, is helping them unpack that for their students.
Yes.
So that was just striking me and reflecting on some of the lessons that students taught in my class last night, is that they kind of just jumped in and they did the I do, we do, you do, and they had the strategies, but they missed the whole, well, why are we even doing this? And like, when do we know how to use it? And that's the kind of thing that makes strategy use effective. So
yeah, and I think what I found really helpful is to remember that there's these different kinds of knowledge: the declarative, the conceptual, the procedural, condition, knowing when and when to apply it, knowing why to apply it, knowing how to apply it, just understanding what it is. Strategic knowledge, to me, is that overarching idea. It should help to organize that other knowledge as they get experience with something and using it, and then in teaching their kids to use it. So that may be just helpful to help them, realize there's these different kinds of knowledge and how to deploy strategies more effectively given certain circumstances.
All right, so I think that was a really great closing comment there. Thanks, Ryan. Closing discussion, I should say. So I know we're at time. I think we wanted to have a really quick discussion about, what further professional development opportunities we can offer. So we were thinking about doing, something sort of like this, sort of like the faculty forums. I'm not really sure. We were looking for ideas from all of our participants. So if you don't have one right now, that's okay. You can email it to Diane and I. We're more than happy to take suggestions via email. We were kind of mulling.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, thanks.
Or if anyone has another a reading or a book selection, or maybe not a whole book, but a reading that sort of builds on these 7 principles in your area that you think would be fun to read together, or would help you extend and further contextualize it, because I think that's the work, right? These principles that kind of all make sense, the strategies make sense, but then it's the doing. It's how do we support each other in the doing of it? And when the contexts are always more complicated than you have it sort of understood in your head, but then it's complex. So there's all this stuff going on. So how do I want to think it through in this new environment or with this new set of learners? So that's the kind of hope we have, to sort of support continued sharing and thinking. And maybe somebody else would like, if someone has a good reading, are we going to keep going every 3rd Tuesday? Is that what we've been doing, Anthony? It's every 3rd Tuesday.
I'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, and think about it. If you have like an article or a reading,
yeah, it doesn't have to be a book. We were kind of discussing just, taking on, individual topics instead of an entire book before we hop into the next book. Maybe take, 2 or 3 individual topics. And then when we find another book that would be relevant to everyone, do that instead. But yeah, so exactly. If you have a resource, we'd love to take a look at it. Maybe we can make it the focus. I'm gonna post this video and the PowerPoint slides in our online D2L shell, along with the rest of our meetings. Thank you all for attending.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Anthony and Diane.
I know.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Thank you.